The cabin stood alone against the Colorado wind, weathered pine logs dark with age, smoke curling from the stone chimney like a question mark against the winter sky. Inside, firelight painted shadows on walls that had witnessed 40 years of solitude. An old man sat by the hearth, his hands moving with practiced precision across the blade of a knife that had tasted blood more times than he cared to remember. Tobias McCall was 80 years old, though his hands remained steady as a surgeon's. White hair fell past his shoulders, tangled with a beard that reached his chest. Deep lines carved his face like canyons, worn by decades of mountain weather. But his eyes, pale blue as glacier ice, still held the sharpness of a hunting hawk. The door burst open. A young man stumbled in, snowflakes melting on his dark coat, anger radiating from every jerking movement. Samuel Rivers, 16 years old and burning with the kind of rage that only the young can sustain. His grandfather's grandson, though they had met only twice before. The old man did not look up from his knife. Samuel slammed the door, crossed the room in 3 strides, his boots tracking snow across the worn floorboards. "Grandfather, I need you to teach me how to kill a man." The rhythmic scraping of steel on whetstone stopped. Silence filled the cabin like smoke. Tobias finally raised his eyes, studying the boy with the same careful attention he once gave to tracking elk through winter snow. The kid was tall, lean, with his grandmother's dark hair and his father's stubborn jaw. But it was the eyes that worried the old man. Too bright, too hard. The eyes of someone who had decided that violence was the answer before understanding the question. "Your father," Tobias said, his voice rough from disuse, "would not want this." "My father is dead." The words came out like stones thrown out a window. "Germans killed him at Belleau Wood, shot him in the trenches while he was trying to save another soldier. He died in the mud, grandfather. In the goddamn mud." Tobias set down the knife and whetstone with deliberate care. He reached for the poker, stirred the fire, watched sparks rise toward the darkness of the chimney. "So you came here to learn how to become a killer, to balance the scales, to get justice." "Justice!" The old man tasted the word like something bitter. "Boy, do you know the difference between justice and revenge?" Samuel's jaw clenched. "Does it matter? They killed him. Someone has to pay." Tobias stood slowly, joints protesting with small sounds that reminded him of breaking ice. He crossed to a shelf carved into the cabin wall, ran his fingers across the scarred wood until they found what he sought. A wooden box, small enough to fit in 2 hands, darkened with age and handling. He carried it back to the fire, sat down heavily in his chair, placed the box on his lap. Samuel watched, his anger momentarily displaced by curiosity. "Before I teach you how to kill," Tobias said, "I will tell you a story about a man who thought killing was the answer, about the woman who taught him different." "I didn't come here for stories." "Then you came to the wrong place." The old man's voice carried an edge now, sharp as the knife he had been sharpening. "You want to learn about death? First you learn about what it is. You sit down, you listen, or you walk back out that door and figure it out yourself." Samuel hesitated, anger and curiosity warring in his young face. Finally, he pulled up a rough stool and sat, close enough to feel the fire's heat. Tobias opened the box. Inside, nestled in faded cloth, 3 objects rested like sacred relics. A photograph on glass, the image ghostly in the firelight. An eagle feather, white and brown, the tip worn smooth. A spent bullet, brass tarnished to the color of old blood. The old man lifted the photograph with hands that trembled slightly now. Not from age, but from memory. The image showed a woman, young, with dark skin and darker eyes, her hair long and unbound. Her expression was difficult to read, caught somewhere between defiance and exhaustion. But it was the way she looked at the camera, direct and unflinching, that arrested the eye. "Her name was Kiona," Tobias said softly, "rising moon in her language. Apache, Chiricahua band. When I met her, she was 24 years old, and she had already survived things that would break most men twice her age." He paused, his thumb tracing the edge of the glass plate. "The year was 1876, September. I was 36 years old, living alone in these mountains, trying to forget what I had done 12 years before, trying to forget Sand Creek." Samuel leaned forward. "What happened at Sand Creek?" "That comes later in the story. First, you need to understand how I found her. Or maybe how she found me. The old man's eyes grew distant, seeing past the cabin walls into a time 4 decades gone. It was late afternoon, sun dropping toward the western peaks. I was tracking an elk 3 days into the hunt, needed meat for winter. The trail led me higher than I planned, up towards Superstition Mountain, Apache country. Sacred ground. White men who went there usually did not come back. He closed his eyes, and the years fell away. The September heat pressed down like a physical weight, even at 8,000 feet. Tobias moved through scrub pine and juniper, following tracks that told him the elk had passed this way hours before. His rifle, a Sharps 50 caliber, rested easy in his hands. The weapon had cost him $50 6 years ago, purchased from a buffalo hunter who had decided the great herds were hunted out and it was time to find a new trade. The rifle could kill at 500 yards in the right hands. Tobias had the right hands. He wore buckskin, soft and silent, tanned with elk brains and smoke in the old Shoshone way his mother had taught him before the white man's sickness took her. His hair, black then, hung to his shoulders beneath a slouch hat made from the hide of a grizzly bear. The bear had nearly killed him 4 years back. The scars across his chest, 4 parallel lines from collarbone to ribs, reminded him every day that death lived close in these mountains. But it was not the thought of death that stopped him in his tracks. It was the smell. Blood, fresh, human, and something else. Something burnt. Tobias crouched, reading the ground. No tracks here, the stone too hard. But the wind carried scents from above, from the ridge that marked the summit of Superstition Mountain. He knew he should turn back. Apache's sacred ground meant Apache warriors, and a lone white man, even one who spoke passable Shoshone and could trade basic words in Apache, was not welcome. But the smell of blood nagged at him. He thought of his mother, dead at 32, her body burning with fever, while he sat useless in a cavalry stockade 50 miles away, locked up because he had tried to stop a massacre. He thought of Sarah, his wife, dead 6 years now, her body cold in childbed, while he hunted in these same mountains, returning 3 days too late to say goodbye. The dead whispered in his mind, "Turn around. This is not your concern. Live. Survive. That is all you know how to do." But his feet carried him upward. The summit of Superstition Mountain was a bare expanse of red rock, scattered with sage and greasewood. The sun sat low now, painting everything in shades of copper and blood. And there, at the highest point, a structure rose against the sky. A wooden cross twice the height of a man, rough cut from pine. A woman hung from it. Tobias felt his breath stop in his chest. She was Apache, that much was clear from her clothing, though the dress had been torn, violated. Her skin, brown as creekstone, showed dark bruises along her arms and legs. Her head hung forward, black hair obscuring her face. Rawhide thongs bound her wrists to the crossbeam, pulled tight enough that her shoulders had been wrenched from their natural position. Her left leg was bent at an unnatural angle, bound to the upright beam, forcing her body into a twisted mockery of crucifixion. For a moment, Tobias thought she was dead. Then he saw her chest rise and fall, shallow but steady. He moved closer, his mountain man's caution warring with something else. Something he thought he had killed years ago. Compassion, maybe, or guilt, or just the stubborn refusal to let death claim another victim while he stood watching. 10 feet away he stopped. The woman's dress had been cut away at the thigh. On the exposed skin, red and swollen with infection, a brand mark stood out clear as a signature. The letter W, 3 inches high, burned into her flesh with a heated iron. Below it, smaller but equally clear, the number 24. Tobias had seen branding before. Cattle, horses, even slaves in his youth before the war put an end to that particular evil. But this was different. This was deliberate torture, marking a human being like livestock, claiming ownership with hot metal and screaming pain. His eyes moved without his permission, cataloging injuries. The brand, rope burns around her wrists and ankles, bruises in the shape of fingers around her throat. Other marks, other violations that he forced himself not to see. The woman's head lifted. Her eyes, the color of dark honey, found his face. For a moment, neither moved. Then her lips parted, and she spoke a single word in Apache, her voice raw as sandpaper. Ishkeen. Tobias knew enough Apache to understand. Do not look. But he was already looking, already seeing what had been done to her. The shame in her eyes cut deeper than any blade. He turned his face away, but remained where he stood. In the mountain man's trade language, mixed with Shoshone words and a handful of Apache phrases he had learned from traders, he spoke. I do not wish to see, but you need someone to cut you down. Silence, then softer, almost wondering, she spoke in English, rough but understandable. You speak the people's tongue. A little. My mother was Shoshone. She taught me before she died. Another pause. He could hear her breathing, labored and painful. Why are you here, white man? Tracking elk. Found you instead. He kept his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun painted the distant mountains with fire. Who did this to you? Soldiers. Fort Bowie. Colonel Wainwright. The name meant nothing to Tobias, though the fort he knew. 20 miles south, garrison for cavalry units that spent their days chasing Apache raiders and their nights drinking away the boredom of desert duty. Why? I saw what he does, selling guns to my people, to the rebels, making war continue so he grows rich. Her voice caught, pain or emotion or both. He caught me, said I talk too much, said he marked me, so everyone knows I belong to him. Tobias felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had seen enough of white man's justice to know that this woman, even if she survived, would never see her tormentor face trial. Apache women had no standing in white courts. Their testimony meant nothing. They were property at best, vermin at worst. How long have you been here? Since morning, sun high when they left me. Said heat will make me confess my lies before nightfall. A sound that might have been a laugh, broken and bitter. I have no lies to confess, only truth they do not want heard. Tobias made his decision without thinking, the way he made all his best decisions. Thought meant hesitation, and hesitation meant watching another person die while he calculated the cost of intervening. He had spent 12 years calculating that cost. He was done. I am going to cut you down now, he said, still not looking at her. I will try not to hurt you more than necessary, but it will hurt. All things hurt, she said. Do what you must. He moved to the cross, pulling his Bowie knife from its sheath. The blade was 14 inches long, heavy as a hatchet, sharp enough to shave with. He had won it in a card game from a Texas Ranger who had claimed it once belonged to Jim Bowie himself. Tobias doubted the story, but he kept the knife anyway. Good steel was good steel, no matter the pedigree. Before he touched the rawhide thongs, he did something else first. He stripped off his buckskin shirt, leaving himself bare-chested in the cooling evening air. The scars from the grizzly stood out white against his sun-darkened skin. He stepped close to the woman, close enough to feel the heat of fever radiating from her body, and draped the shirt across her torso, covering what the torn dress left exposed. So you are not so naked when I cut you free, he said quietly. He heard her breath catch, surprise maybe, or disbelief that a white man would show such consideration. Thank you, she whispered. He reached up, began sawing through the rawhide at her right wrist. The material was thick, meant to last, tied by someone who knew how to secure a captive. It took 2 minutes of steady cutting before the first thong parted. Her arm dropped, and she grasped as blood rushed back into oxygen-starved tissue. He moved to the left wrist, working faster now. The sun was dropping toward the horizon, and he did not want to be on this mountain after dark. Apache or not, sacred ground or not, darkness in these mountains brought predators. Four-legged and two, the second thong parted. The woman sagged forward, and Tobias caught her shoulders, holding her upright while he cut the bindings on her twisted leg. She bit back a scream as her legs straightened, damaged muscles and ligaments protesting the movement. Finally, she was free. He lowered her to the ground, keeping the buckskin shirt wrapped around her. She sat, trembling, arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes had closed, squeezing out tears that tracked clean lines through the dust on her face. Tobias took a step back, giving her space, giving her dignity. Can you walk? He asked. She tried to push herself up, got halfway to her feet before her injured leg buckled. He caught her before she fell, supporting her weight without looking at her face. My horse is a mile down the ridge, he said. Can you ride? I can do what I must. That same broken laugh. I am Apache. We ride before we walk. A sound carried on the evening air, distant, metallic. A bugle blown badly, the notes stumbling over each other. The woman stiffened in his arms. They are coming back to check if I am dead. Tobias looked toward the sound, 2 miles away, maybe less, moving this direction through the broken terrain below the summit. He could see dust rising, catch glimpses of blue uniforms between the trees. How many? He asked. 2, maybe 3. Wainwright sends his dogs to finish what he starts. Can you stand if I let go? She nodded, gritting her teeth. He released her, watching as she swayed but remained upright, balanced on her good leg. He pulled his rifle from his shoulder, checked the load. 1 round in the chamber, 9 more in the ammunition belt around his waist. Enough for 2 men if he was careful. But 3 might be a problem. We run, he said, or I fight. Your choice. She looked at him then, really looked at him, her honey-colored eyes searching his face for something he could not name. You would fight soldiers? For me? An Apache woman you do not know? I would fight the devil himself if he did what was done to you. Something shifted in her expression. The hard shell of survival cracked just slightly, letting through a glimpse of the person beneath. Scared, exhausted, but not broken. We run, she said. I have seen enough killing. He nodded, moved to her side, let her drape an arm across his shoulders. Together they started down the mountain, her hopping on her good leg, him taking most of her weight. Behind them, the bugle sounded again, closer now. The sun touched the western peaks, and shadows stretched long across the stone. They had maybe 20 minutes before the soldiers reached the summit and found her gone. 20 minutes to disappear into a wilderness that Tobias knew like the lines of his own hand, and the soldiers knew not at all. He hoped it would be enough. The cabin was silent except for the crack and pop of burning wood. Tobias sat with his eyes closed, lost in memory, his hand still resting on the photograph. Samuel had not moved from his stool, his earlier anger forgotten in the grip of the story. Did they catch you? The boy asked. Tobias opened his eyes, returning from the past with visible effort. That comes next, but first you need to understand something. That moment, when I cut her down, I had a choice. Walk away, let her die, stay safe, or help her and become a hunted man. You helped her. I did, and in doing so I set in motion everything that followed. Violence, death, a trial that changed laws, but also something else, something I did not expect. What? The old man looked at his grandson, seeing the boy's father in the young face, seeing all the generations that stretched back and forward, all the choices that built or destroyed families. I learned that sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is not to kill his enemy, but to refuse to become him. Anna Samuel frowned, not understanding. Not yet. Keep listening, Tobias said. The story is just beginning. He reached for the photograph again, his thumb tracing the image of the woman who had changed everything. Outside, wind rattled the cabin walls, and snow began to fall in earnest, covering the mountain in silence. Inside, the old man's voice continued, carrying his grandson back to a time when the West was still wild. Justice was a luxury few could afford, and one man's decision to show mercy set in motion a chain of events that would echo through the decades. The fire burned low. The story went on, and somewhere in the telling, revenge began to look less like justice and more like just another form of dying. The horse was where Tobias had left it, a buckskin gelding with the patience of stone, trained to stand ground-tied for hours if necessary. The animal's ears pricked forward as they approached, catching their scent. But it did not spook at the woman's presence or the smell of blood that clung to both of them. Tobias lifted Kiona into the saddle, ignoring her sharp intake of breath as her injured leg bumped the stirrup. She slumped forward against the horse's neck, exhausted beyond measure. He swung up behind her, pulling her back against his chest, his arm around her waist to keep her from falling. The buckskin shirt still covered her, but he could feel the heat of fever through the leather. Hold on, he said, and kicked the horse into motion. They moved fast, but not recklessly, picking their way down through deadfall and boulder fields that would break a horse's leg if rushed. Tobias knew these mountains the way sailors know stars. Every canyon, every spring, every cave that might offer shelter. His mother had taught him that knowledge before teaching him to read. Survival first. everything else second. Behind them, the bugle called again, closer now, and he heard voices shouting. They had reached the summit, found her gone. In minutes, they would pick up the trail, and then it would become a chase in earnest. Kiona stirred against him. They will follow. Let them follow. I know where I am going. Where? A place they cannot reach. Not tonight, not on tired cavalry horses with sunset coming. He guided the buckskin around a massive ponderosa pine, its bark rough with age. There is a canyon 3 miles north. Entrance is narrow, easy to miss. Inside, a shelf cave with water and cover. We can rest there. Tend your wounds. She said nothing for a long moment. Then so quietly he almost missed it. Why do you help me? Tobias considered the question while the horse picked its way down a scree slope, small stones clattering beneath iron-shod hooves. Why indeed? He had spent 12 years avoiding exactly this kind of trouble. 12 years living alone, speaking to no one, trying to forget the things he had seen and done in the name of duty and civilization and other lies men told themselves to justify horror. Because, he said finally, someone should have helped my mother. And no one did. He felt her relax slightly against him, some of the rigid tension leaving her spine. Your mother was Shoshone, you said. Yes, her name was Morning Dove. She died in a cavalry stockade when I was 12 years old. Smallpox. They locked her up because she was married to a white trapper, my father. They said she was harboring a deserter. She died alone, with no medicine, no help. I was in a different stockade, 50 miles away, arrested for trying to stop what the soldiers were doing. What were they doing? Killing, women and children mostly. A village of Cheyenne who thought they were safe because they had surrendered. Because they flew a white flag and an American flag both, trying to show they wanted peace. His jaw tightened. The officers saw the flags, gave the order anyway. Kill them all, they said. Leave no survivors. Sand Creek, she said. You know it? Every Indian knows it. My father spoke of it before he died. Said it proved the white man's peace was a lie. Said we should never surrender, never trust their flags and treaties. He was right. Tobias said nothing. What could he say? She was right, and he was part of the reason she was right. He had been there. He had not stopped it. 24 years old, a scout for Colonel Chivington's 3rd Colorado Cavalry, he had led them to that village because he had been ordered to, because he thought soldiers followed rules and protected the innocent. He had learned otherwise. The memory rose up sharp as broken glass. The screams, the smoke, the smell of burning lodges and burning flesh. He had tried to stop it, putting himself between a group of women and the troopers chasing them. A rifle butt to the face had taught him the lesson every Indian learns sooner or later. White justice was for white men. Everyone else got white violence. They had locked him up for 2 weeks. Insubordination. Interfering with military operations. When they released him, his mother was dead, buried in an unmarked grave outside Fort Lyon. His father had vanished into the mountains, never to be seen again. And Tobias had walked away from the cavalry, from white civilization, from everything except the wilderness that did not judge and did not lie, 12 years ago. But the memory still had teeth. The canyon mouth appeared ahead, exactly where Tobias knew it would be. A crack in the stone wall, barely wide enough for a horse, overgrown with juniper and sage that hid it from casual view. He guided the buckskin through, branches scratching at his bare shoulders, and they emerged into a hidden world. The canyon was narrow. Jayan is narrow, no more than 50 feet wide, with sheer walls rising 200 feet on either side. A seasonal stream ran through the center, still flowing strong from late summer storms. Cottonwoods and willows clustered along the water, their leaves already beginning to turn gold with the approaching autumn. Above, a strip of sky showed deep blue, scattered with the first stars of evening. Halfway up the south wall, a shelf jutted out, and beneath it a cave mouth opened like a dark eye. Tobias had sheltered there before, during winter storms that made travel impossible. It was dry, deep enough to build a fire without smoke showing, and impossible to approach without making noise on the loose scree that covered the slope below it. A perfect hiding place. He dismounted, helped Kiona down, and she immediately collapsed, her good leg no longer able to support her weight. He caught her before she hit the ground, lifted her in his arms, surprised at how light she was. Fever and dehydration had burned away what little flesh she carried. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "You can fall. I prefer to carry you." He started up the slope, boots finding purchase on the loose rock through long practice. The horse followed, trained to that kind of work, and together they reached the cave as the last light faded from the sky. Inside, the cave was larger than it appeared from below. 15 feet deep, 12 feet wide at the mouth, tapering to a point at the back. The ceiling was high enough to stand upright, blackened from old fires. Someone had stacked firewood in the back corner, dry and seasoned, left by another traveler, or perhaps by Tobias himself on a previous visit. Desert etiquette. You left things for the next person who needed shelter. He laid Kiona on the ground near the cave mouth, where she could catch the breeze, but remain hidden from view. Then he set about building a fire, arranging stones in a careful ring, piling tinder and kindling with the precision of long habit. His fire kit was in his saddlebags, flint and steel, and a scrap of charred cloth that caught sparks like a lover's whisper. Strike, spark, blow gently. The char cloth began to glow. He transferred it to the tinder bundle, blew again, and flame bloomed yellow and pure. He fed it carefully, building it up until proper flames danced across the kindling, then added larger pieces until a proper fire crackled and popped in the gathering darkness. Only then did he turn his attention to Kiona. She lay on her side, eyes closed, breath shallow and rapid. The buckskin shirt had slipped aside, and in the firelight he could see the full extent of the damage. The brand on her thigh, angry red and weeping clear fluid. Rope burns around her wrists, raw and bleeding. Bruises everywhere, some fresh purple, others fading to yellow-green. And other marks, other violations he forced himself not to catalog. Whoever had done this had not simply hurt her, they had tried to destroy her, break her down into nothing but pain and shame and submission. They had failed. He could see it in the set of her jaw, the way her hands had curled into fists even in exhaustion. This woman was not broken. Bent, maybe, battered. But the core of her remained intact, hard as obsidian. He respected that. "I need to clean your wounds," he said, unsure if she was conscious enough to hear. "It will hurt. I am sorry." Her eyes opened, just slits. "Do what you must." He retrieved his possibles bag from the horse's saddle, the leather sack that held everything a mountain man needed to survive. Spare powder and shot, fishing line and hooks, a small sewing kit with needles and thread made from deer sinew, a tin cup, a cake of lye soap, and most importantly for now, a small clay pot sealed with wax, bear grease. He had killed the grizzly 4 years ago, after it had nearly killed him. The scars on his chest were a permanent reminder that even the most experienced hunter could make mistakes. The bear had been old, winter-hungry, desperate enough to attack a human. He had shot it 3 times before it died, and even then it had lived long enough to open him up from collarbone to navel. A Ute medicine woman passing through these mountains on her way to join her people in Utah territory had found him bleeding out against a pine tree. She had sewn him up with catgut and her own hair, fed him bitter tea that brought down the fever, packed his wounds with a poultice that smelled of sage and things he could not name. When he asked what he owed her, she said only this: "The bear's fat, render it, keep it, it has power, it will heal wounds when nothing else will." He had rendered the fat, boiled it down and strained it through clean cloth, poured it into clay pots and sealed them with wax. He had used it sparingly over the years, only for the worst injuries, and he had never had cause to doubt the Ute woman's words. Bear grease healed. How or why, he did not know. But it worked. He broke the seal on the pot, scooped out a generous amount of the pale yellow fat, and moved to kneel beside Kiona. "This will hurt," he repeated, "but it will help the infection. I promise." "I trust you," she said, and he believed her, though he did not understand why she should. He started with the brand, the worst of the injuries. He could see infection already setting in, red streaks radiating out from the burn, the skin hot to the touch. Without treatment, she would be dead in 3 days, maybe less. Fever would climb until it cooked her brain, and she would die thrashing and delirious, calling out for people who could not hear her. He had seen it before, too many times. He spread the bear grease across the wound with fingers that tried to be gentle, but knew they were causing agony anyway. She gasped, went rigid, her hands clutching at the stone beneath her. But she did not cry out, did not beg him to stop. Apache women did not cry, she had said, not in front of enemies. And though he was helping her, though he had cut her down and carried her to safety, she did not yet know if he was friend or simply a different kind of enemy. He worked methodically, covering the brand with a thick layer of grease, then moving to her wrists, her ankles, everywhere the ropes had cut deep enough to draw blood. He tore strips from the bottom of his buckskin shirt, using them to bandage the worst wounds, tying the cloth tight enough to protect, but not so tight as to cut off circulation. When he finished, he sat back on his heels, exhausted. There, it is done. Now you need to rest and drink water. The fever will get worse before it gets better. How do you know this? About healing? My mother taught me some. The Ute woman taught me more. And I have lived alone in these mountains long enough to learn what works and what does not. Mostly I have learned by keeping myself alive when I probably should have died. Kiona studied him in the firelight, her gaze sharp despite the fever. You are not like other white men. I am not all white. My father was French, my mother Shoshone. I am neither and both. The whites accept you? No. The Indians? Also no. She smiled slightly, wincing as the expression pulled at split lips. Then you understand, to be trapped between worlds, to belong nowhere. Yes, I understand that very well. They were silent for a long moment, listening to the fire crack, and the wind move through the canyon below. Then Kiona spoke again, her voice softer now, the hard edge of survival giving way to something more vulnerable. I thought I would die on that mountain. Alone, with only the buzzards to witness. You gave me something I thought was lost. You gave me choice. The choice to cover my body, the choice to be seen or not seen. Do you know what that means, after what was done to me? Tobias shook his head. I can imagine, but I cannot know. It means everything. She closed her eyes, exhaustion finally claiming her. Everything. He watched her slip into sleep, her breathing gradually evening out, the worst of the pain temporarily numbed by the bear grease and the simple fact of being safe, for now, from further harm. Then he rose, moved to the cave mouth, and looked out at the darkness. Below in the canyon, he could hear his horse cropping grass, the sound peaceful and ordinary. Above, stars wheeled in their ancient dance, indifferent to human suffering and human courage alike. And somewhere in the mountains behind them, soldiers searched for an escaped captive and the man who had freed her. Let them search. These mountains had hidden refugees and outlaws for generations. They would hide two more. Tobias settled against the cave wall, his rifle across his knees, and prepared for a long night. Sleep would come in snatches, if at all. But that was the price of the choice he had made, to help instead of walk away, to become hunted instead of remaining hidden. He thought of his grandson, waiting in the cabin for the story to continue. Thought of the anger in the boy's eyes, the hunger for revenge that would eat him alive if left unfed. This was why he told the story, not to glorify violence or justify killing, but to show that sometimes the hardest battles were fought not with guns and knives, but with the simple decision to remain human when everything pushed you toward becoming a monster. He had learned that lesson the hard way, learned it in blood and fire at Sand Creek, learned it again on that mountain summit when he chose to cut down a suffering woman rather than ride past and preserve his safety. Now his grandson needed to learn it, before the boy's anger turned him into something his father would not recognize. The fire burned low, the stars wheeled overhead, and in the darkness, Tobias kept watch, guarding the woman who had already taught him that survival was only the beginning of living, and that sometimes mercy was the most radical form of resistance. The story was not finished, not by half, but the first chapter had been written, there on the mountain, with a knife and a choice and a woman who refused to break no matter how hard the world tried to shatter her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more danger, decisions that would test both of them in ways they could not yet imagine. But tonight, they were alive. They were safe. And they had each other, two people who belonged nowhere else, finding common ground in survival and shared understanding. It would have to be enough. Dawn came cold to the canyon, mist rising from the stream below like spirits ascending. Tobias woke to the sound of movement, his hand finding the rifle before his eyes fully opened. A lifetime of survival had trained him to wake alert, ready for threat. But it was only Kiona, sitting upright near the cave mouth, watching the sunrise paint the eastern cliffs in shades of copper and gold. "You should rest," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "I have rested enough." She turned to face him, and he saw that the fever had broken during the night. Her eyes were clear now, focused. The infection would take days to fully heal, but the immediate crisis had passed. How long before they find us? Tobias considered. He had tracked enough men and been tracked by enough to know how this would unfold. If they are smart, they will wait for dawn, pick up our trail in good light. If they are angry, they came last night and lost the track in darkness. Either way, by midday they will know which canyon we entered. And then we have choices. Fight, run, or find help. She wrapped her arms around herself, still wearing his buckskin shirt, the leather now marked with dried blood and medicine. "I will not run forever. I am tired of running." "Then we find help. I know a man, former cavalry but honest. He lives 15 miles northwest, has a small ranch. If anyone will stand against Fort Bowie, it would be Cal Turner." A white man? Who would stand for an Apache woman? A man who believes in doing what is right, regardless of color. Tobias stood, moved to check the horse, which had spent the night on the shelf outside the cave. "Cal and I served together years ago. He saved my life at Fort Laramie when 3 Lakota warriors had me pinned down. Took a spear through his leg doing it. He owes me nothing, but I believe he will help anyway." Kiona rose carefully, testing her injured leg. She could put weight on it now, though she still limped badly. "Why do you trust him?" "Because when his wife died 3 years ago, killed by Apache raiders using Winchester rifles, he did not blame all Apache. He blamed whoever sold them the guns. He said to me then that the real enemy was not red or white, but greed. Men who profit from war, who keep the killing going because peace would hurt their purses." Something flickered in Kiona's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or irony. His wife was killed by Winchesters? Yes. The raiders hit his ranch at dawn. Sarah Turner died protecting their daughter. Cal arrived from town an hour too late. He found 15 spent cartridges. Winchester Model 73, cavalry model. The same guns Wainwright sells. It was not a question. Perhaps the same shipment. The world is full of such circles, coming back to haunt us. Kiona moved to stand beside him at the cave mouth, looking out at the brightening sky. "When I saw Wainwright's records, there were many sales. Apache, Comanche, even Sioux, though they are far to the north. He sells to anyone who will buy, makes all tribes enemies of the whites, keeps the war going, collects his money from both sides." "How did you see these records? Why were you at Fort Bowie?" She was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of shame and anger mixed. "After my father was hanged at San Carlos Reservation, after my brother died of the white man's fever, Wainwright came. He said I could be useful, said I spoke English, could read and write because the missionaries taught me. He said I would be a translator, help make peace between the soldiers and my people. But that was not what he wanted. No." The word came out flat, dead. What he wanted was a slave, someone to warm his bed, someone he could hurt when the mood took him. "And when I saw too much, when I found his secret ledgers and understood what he was doing, he decided I needed to be marked, like cattle, like property, so everyone would know I belonged to him." Tobias felt cold fury settle in his chest, not the hot rage that demanded immediate violence, but the cold kind that made men capable of terrible patience. 24, he said, remembering the number burned into her flesh. "You were the 24th. Yes, there were others before me, other Apache women, other Navajo, even some Mexican girls from the border towns. All marked, all disappeared after Wainwright tired of them. I was to be next. But you escaped. I was rescued." She looked at him then, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words, by a mountain man who should have ridden past, who should have preserved his own safety, but did not. He met her gaze steadily. I made that mistake before, riding past, choosing safety over what was right. I will not make it twice. Before she could respond, a sound carried up from the canyon below, distant but clear, the baying of hounds, bloodhounds, tracking dogs. They had found the trail. Tobias moved fast, years of wilderness living making him efficient. He scattered the fire, covering the ashes with sand from the cave floor, gathered his possibles bag, checked his weapons. The Sharp's rifle held 1 round. He loaded 4 more from his ammunition belt, leaving 5 for reserve. The Colt Peacemaker at his hip held 6 rounds, and he had another 12 in the loops on his belt, 18 rounds total. Against how many soldiers, he did not know. Can you ride? He asked Kiona. If I must. You must. We cannot outfight them, but we can outrun them if we move now. Cavalry horses are grain-fed, soft. My buckskin was born wild, knows how to survive on sage and scrub grass. We have the advantage if we use it. They descended from the cave quickly, the loose scree sliding beneath their boots. The buckskin stood patient, ears pricked toward the sound of approaching hounds, but not yet spooked. Good horse, worth every dollar of the 40 Tobias had paid for him 2 years back. He lifted Kiona into the saddle, swung up behind her, and guided the horse into the stream. The water was cold, snow melt from high peaks, and it ran fast enough to scatter scent and confuse the dogs. They followed it north, staying in the current, the horse's hooves finding purchase on river stones worn smooth by centuries of flow. Behind them, the hounds grew louder. They stayed in the water for half a mile before Tobias guided the buckskin up a rocky slope where the stone would hold no track. From there, they moved east, through stands of ponderosa pine and Douglas fir, the morning sun filtering through branches in shafts of gold. He rode with care, avoiding soft ground, choosing routes over stone and hardpan where possible, but he knew the dogs would follow. Might take them longer, might lose the scent for periods, but eventually they would pick it up again. Hounds were patient, and the men who handled them were professionals, chosen for their skill at tracking fugitives through difficult terrain. How far to your friend's ranch? Kiona asked, her voice steady despite the rough pace. 10 miles, maybe 12. We can make it by noon if we push. And if the soldiers catch us first, then we fight and pray that 18 rounds are enough. They rode in silence after that, the only sounds the horses breathing, the creak of saddle leather, the whisper of wind through pine needles. Tobias kept them moving fast, faster than was wise for the terrain. But speed mattered more than caution now. Every minute put distance between them and the pursuit, bought them time to reach help before the soldiers closed the gap. The sun climbed toward midday. The temperature rose, typical for September in these mountains. Warm days, cold nights, the seasons balanced on the edge between summer and autumn. Tobias felt sweat run down his bare chest, remembered his buckskin shirt still covered Kiona. He would need to find new clothes at Cal's ranch. A man could not ride around shirtless indefinitely, not with winter coming in another month. They crested a ridge, and below them spread a valley, green with late summer growth, a small ranch house visible near a creek. Corrals, a barn, fields of hay already cut and stacked for winter feed. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin and steady. Someone was home. Cal Turner's place. Sanctuary, if Cal would grant it. Tobias urged the buckskin down the slope, feeling Kiona tense against him as they approached civilization. He understood her fear. Every white settlement she had seen in recent years had brought only pain. Why should this one be different? Cal is a good man, he said quietly. I swear to you, he will not hurt you. I have heard such promises before. I know, but I am asking you to trust me one more time, just until we reach the house. If I am wrong, if he betrays us, you have my permission to take my rifle and shoot him yourself. That surprised a small laugh from her, brittle but genuine. You would let me kill your friend? If he proved himself unworthy of the title, yes. They rode into the yard, and the front door opened before they reached it. A man stepped out, lean and weathered, his left leg stiff from an old injury that had never healed right. Cal Turner, 53 years old, his hair gray at the temples, his eyes still sharp as broken flint. He held a rifle, not aimed, but ready. Then he recognized Tobias, and the rifle lowered. Bear Macau, what trouble have you brought to my door this time? Tobias had not heard that name in years. Bear. The mountain men had given it to him after the grizzly incident. Said any man who could survive those wounds earned a better name than the one his French father had chosen. He had worn it for a while, but when Sarah died, he had put it aside along with everything else that connected him to the world of people. The kind of trouble that needs a friend, Tobias said, dismounting carefully, helping Kiona down. Cal Turner, this is Kiona, rising moon in her language. She needs help. We both do. Cal's gaze moved from Tobias to Kiona, taking in her appearance, the buckskin shirt too large for her frame, the bandages visible at wrists and ankles, the way she held herself despite obvious pain. His expression shifted from wariness to something harder. Recognition of suffering. Come inside, he said. Both of you. Whatever the trouble is, we can discuss it better with coffee and food. You look like you have not eaten in days. We have not, Tobias admitted. And there is more. Fort Bowie soldiers are tracking us. Maybe an hour behind, maybe less. Hounds with them. Cal's jaw tightened. Fort Bowie. Let me guess. Colonel Wainwright. You know him? I know of him. Every rancher within 100 miles knows of him. He has been buying up land, cheap, from people who suddenly find themselves having trouble with Indian raids. Coincidentally, these raids always happen after they refuse to sell at his price. Cal stepped aside, gesturing them toward the door. Come, we will talk inside. My daughter is here. Emma. She is 15, smart as a whip, and I trust her with my life. You can trust her with yours. They entered the ranch house and warmth enveloped them. A fire burned in the stone hearth despite the warm day. A girl stood by the kitchen table, slicing bread, her hands quick and practiced. She looked up as they entered, and Tobias saw Cal's late wife in the shape of her face, the color of her eyes. But it was her reaction to Kiona that mattered. No fear, no disgust, just curiosity and something that might have been sympathy. Papa, she said, setting down the knife, your friend is hurt. This is Kiona, Cal said. She has had a hard time. Can you help her clean up while Bear and I talk? Emma crossed the room without hesitation, taking Kiona's hand gently. Come, we have a room in the back. I will heat water for washing, and I have a dress that might fit you. It was my mother's, but she would want someone to use it. Kiona looked at Tobias, seeking permission or perhaps reassurance. He nodded. Go. You are safe here. I promise. She let the girl lead her away, and Tobias watched them disappear through a doorway before turning back to Cal. The older man was already pouring coffee, 2 tin cups that steamed in the cool interior of the house. Tell me everything, Cal said. Leave nothing out. If Fort Bowie is coming for you, I need to know why. So Tobias told him. The mountain, the woman crucified and branded, the escape, the night in the canyon, the hounds on their trail, and finally what Kiona had revealed about Wainwright's gun-running operation. When he finished, Cal was silent for a long time, staring into his coffee as if seeking answers in its dark surface. Sarah died 3 years ago, he said finally. Apache raiders using Winchester rifles. New, well-maintained ammunition to spare. I always wondered where they got those weapons. Apache are poor. They steal most of their guns or take them from dead soldiers. But these were bought. I could tell by the way they were cared for. Someone had sold them quality weapons and taught them how to maintain them properly. Wainwright. Perhaps. Probably. And if he sold guns to the Apache who killed my wife, then he is as responsible for her death as the men who pulled the triggers. Cal set down his coffee cup with careful precision, as if restraining himself from throwing it. So yes, Bear, I will help you. Not just because you are my friend, though that would be enough, but because that bastard needs to answer for what he has done. To your Kiona, to my Sarah, to how many others we cannot know. Thank you. The words seemed inadequate, but they were all Tobias had. Do not thank me yet. Helping you means going against the army, means making powerful enemies. Wainwright has friends in Washington, connections to Congress. Taking him down will not be simple. I do not need simple. I need possible. Cal smiled grimly. Then you came to the right place. I know a few people, former soldiers mostly, men who left the service because they were tired of corruption, tired of officers who cared more about profit than duty. Give me a day and I can gather maybe 5, 6 men willing to stand witness. Witness to what? To whatever charges we can bring against Wainwright. But first we need evidence. Real evidence. Not just the word of an Apache woman, no offense to Kiona, but white courts will not convict a colonel based on her testimony alone. We need documents, proof of the gun sales, names of buyers, dates, numbers. Those records are at Fort Bowie in Wainwright's office. Then we need someone to get them out. That is suicide. The fort is garrisoned by 50 soldiers. We cannot just walk in. No, Cal agreed. But maybe one man could, if he were smart, if he had help from someone who knows the fort's layout. They both looked toward the back room where Kiona and Emma had disappeared. An hour later, they gathered around Cal's kitchen table. Kiona had washed, changed into a simple cotton dress that had belonged to Cal's wife, her hair braided back in the Apache style. She looked different, cleaner, but the hardness in her eyes remained. That would not wash away so easily. Emma sat beside her, and Tobias noticed how the girl had positioned herself, protective without being obvious, already loyal to this stranger. Children saw truth more clearly than adults, he thought. They had not yet learned to hide behind lies and propriety. We need those records, Cal said without preamble. Can you draw us a map of Fort Bowie? Show us where Wainwright keeps his office? Kiona nodded slowly. I can, but you must understand. The fort is always guarded, day and night. There are sentries at every entrance. Guards patrol between the buildings. Getting in will be difficult. Getting out with stolen documents will be impossible. Not impossible, said a voice from the doorway. Just very, very difficult. They all turned. A man stood there, lean and dark, his features suggesting mixed heritage. Native and white, like Tobias himself. But where Tobias favored his French father's build, this man showed the compact strength of the Plains tribes. Crow, perhaps, or Blackfoot. Jonas, Cal said, rising, I sent Emma to fetch you. Glad you came. You said it was important, and when Cal Turner sends for me, I come. The man called Jonas stepped inside, moving with the fluid grace of someone comfortable in his own skin. Who are your friends? Tobias McCall, used to be called Bear. This is Kiona, of the Chiricahua Apache. They need help. Jonas studied them both, his gaze lingering on Kiona. Apache. And you brought her to a white man's ranch? Bold. I brought her to a friend's ranch, Tobias corrected. Color does not matter here. Color always matters, but perhaps less here than other places. Jonas sat down at the table without invitation, the action of a man used to being welcome. So, what help do you need? Cal explained the situation, and Jonas listened without interruption, his face revealing nothing. When Cal finished, Jonas was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I can get into Fort Bowie, he said. I have done it before. What? Cal looked surprised. When? 2 years ago, scouting for the army, before I decided they were more interested in killing Indians than protecting settlers. I spent 3 months at Fort Bowie learning the layout, the routines, who could be trusted and who could not. I know which guards drink on duty. I know which ones fall asleep at their posts. I know the blind spots where patrols do not look. You were a scout? Tobias asked. Crow Scout. Cavalry used us to track hostile weed bands. Ironic, really. Teaching white soldiers how to kill other Indians? But the pay was good, and at the time, I convinced myself I was helping protect innocent settlers. His expression turned bitter. I learned otherwise. Now I work alone. Guide hunters, track missing cattle, avoid the army when possible. But you would go back to Fort Bowie for us? Jonas looked at Kiona, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. The shared understanding of what it meant to be caught between two worlds, belonging to neither. I will go back. Not for you, white man. For her. Because I know what Wainwright does to women. I have seen the results before in villages my cavalry unit visited. Girls taken. Girls returned broken. If they returned at all. If I can bring evidence to put that monster in chains, I will do it. Thank you, Kiona said softly. Do not thank me yet. This is dangerous work. I might get caught, might get killed, might fail completely and leave you with nothing. Jonas leaned back in his chair. But I will try, because trying is better than doing nothing. Cal pulled out a piece of paper, set it before Kiona with a pencil. Draw me that map, everything you remember, where Wainwright's office is located, where he keeps the safe, everything. Kiona took the pencil, her hand steady despite everything she had endured. She began to draw, and as she worked, Tobias saw her transformation. No longer just a victim, now a participant in her own rescue, someone fighting back, using her knowledge as a weapon. The map took shape: buildings, guard posts, patrol routes, and at the center, marked with an X, Wainwright's office. The safe is behind a portrait of President Grant, Kiona said as she drew. Combination lock. The numbers are 071527, his birthday July 15th, and the number of women he has marked. Jonas studied the map, committing it to memory. How long was I inside Fort Bowie before? 3 months, Cal reminded him. Then I know most of this already, but this helps. He tapped the X, marking Wainwright's office. I can be there by nightfall. Get inside after midnight when the guards are tired. Out before dawn. Back here by tomorrow noon with whatever I find. And if you are caught? Emma asked, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. Jonas smiled at her, and it was not a kind smile. Then your father will know I failed when I do not return, and you will need to find another way. There must be another way now, Emma protested, something less dangerous. There is always another way, Jonas agreed, but this is the fastest, and time matters. The longer we wait, the more chance Wainwright has to move his records, hide his crimes, prepare his defense. We strike fast, or we do not strike at all. He was right, and they all knew it. Cal stood, moved to a cabinet, and returned with a gun belt, a Colt revolver, clean and well-oiled. He handed it to Jonas. Take this, just in case. I do not plan to shoot anyone. Plans change, take it anyway. Jonas buckled on the gun belt, adjusted it until the weight sat comfortably on his hip. Then he turned to Kiona. Is there anything else I should know? Any detail that might help? She thought for a moment. Wainwright uses morphine for pain from an old war wound. He keeps a bottle in his desk drawer. By midnight, he has usually taken his dose. He will be deep asleep, difficult to wake. That is when you should enter. Good information. Thank you. If you find the records, look also for a small leather book. Brown cover, no marking. It contains names, women he has taken, what he paid for them, where they came from. Some are marked with red ink. Those are the ones who died, who he killed or had killed when he tired of them. Jonas's expression went very still. I will find it, I promise you that. He left without further ceremony, slipping out into the afternoon sun, and Tobias watched him go with mixed feelings. Hope that they might actually have evidence to use against Wainwright. Fear that Jonas would not return, that this brave man would die for a cause that was not even his own. He will succeed, Kiona said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. He is Crow. They are known for stealth, for moving unseen. If anyone can do this, he can. I hope you are right. So do I, because if he fails, I have nothing. Just my word against a white colonel's. And we both know whose word the court will believe. That was the bitter truth of it. Without evidence, without proof beyond the brand on her thigh and the scars on her wrists, Kiona would never see justice. Wainwright would deny everything, claim she was a willing participant, or perhaps even a liar trying to extort money. White judges would believe him because believing her would mean admitting that their system was broken, that officers they trusted were monsters, that the very institutions meant to protect civilization were tools of oppression. It was easier to blame the victim. It always had been. But maybe, just maybe, Jonas would bring back something that could not be denied. Numbers, dates, names, evidence that even the most prejudiced court could not ignore. They could only wait and hope. Night fell, and with it came the cold wind off the mountains. Cal built up the fire, and they sat around it, talking little, each lost in their own thoughts. Emma had put together a meal from what stores they had. Venison stew with potatoes and carrots from the root cellar. Bread baked that morning. It was simple food, but after 2 days of nothing, it tasted better than anything Tobias could remember. Kiona ate slowly, carefully, her body still recovering from trauma and fever. But she ate, and that was good. The body could not heal without fuel. "Tell me about your daughter," Kiona said to Cal during a lull in the meal. "She is very kind. That is rare." Cal glanced at Emma, who had gone to clean dishes, and his expression softened. "She is like her mother. Sarah taught her to see people, not skin color, not race, just people, each with their own story, their own struggles. It is a lesson not enough folks learn." "Your wife sounds like she was a good woman." "She was. The best I ever knew." Cal stared into the fire. "When she died, I wanted to hate all Apache. It would have been easy, natural even. But Sarah would not have wanted that. She would have asked who sold the guns, who profited from her death. And when I asked those questions, I realized the real enemy was not the desperate men who pulled triggers, but the wealthy men who put guns in their hands for profit. Like Wainwright. Like Wainwright, men who see war as a business opportunity, who keep conflicts burning because peace would cost them money. Those are the real monsters, not the poor fools they use as weapons." Kiona was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "My father believed all white men were evil. He died believing it. But you make me think he was wrong, or at least not completely right. Some white men are evil, but some, like you and Tobias, are simply men. Good and bad mixed together, trying to do the right thing in a world that makes it hard." "That is all any of us can do," Cal agreed. "Try, and keep trying, even when we fail, especially when we fail." The door opened, and Emma returned from outside where she had been dumping wash water. She brought with her a gust of cold air and information. "Papa, there are lights on the ridge. Torches, I think. Moving this way." Everyone stood at once. Cal moved to the window, peered out into the darkness. Tobias joined him, and yes, there they were. Pinpricks of light, perhaps a mile distant, moving along the ridge road that led to the ranch. "How many?" Cal asked. Tobias counted. 6, maybe 7. Could be travelers. "At night? Unlikely. More likely it is your soldiers from Fort Bowie." Cal turned from the window, his expression grim. "They will be here in 30 minutes, maybe less. We need to decide what to do." "I will not bring trouble to your house," Tobias said. "Kiona and I will leave. Lead them away." "No," Cal's voice was firm. "You leave, they will track you, catch you in the dark where you have no advantage. Better to stay, face them here where we have walls and weapons and the high ground." "Face them? You mean fight the army?" "I mean stand our ground. There is a difference." Cal crossed to a cabinet, opened it, revealing a small arsenal. 3 rifles, 2 shotguns, boxes of ammunition. "I am not without resources, and I am not without rights. This is my land. If they want to search it, they need a warrant. If they try to take someone by force, they are acting outside their authority." "Since when does the army care about authority when dealing with Indians?" Kiona asked bitterly. "Since they are on my land, threatening my guests, and I have witnesses to their actions." Cal began loading rifles with practiced efficiency. "Emma, go to the root cellar. Stay there until I come for you." "Papa, I want to help." "You help by staying safe. Go, now." The girl hesitated, looked like she might argue, but something in her father's expression stopped her. She hugged Kiona quickly, whispered something Tobias could not hear, then disappeared through the back door toward the cellar. Cal handed Tobias a Winchester repeater. "You remember how to use one of these?" "Been a while, but yes." "Good, you take the loft. Best angle to cover the yard. Kiona, can you shoot?" "I can throw a knife with accuracy. Guns, I am less familiar." "Then you stay down here, away from windows. If shooting starts, get to the root cellar with Emma. Understood?" She nodded, though Tobias could see she was not happy about being relegated to safety while others fought. But Cal was right. An untrained person with a gun in the middle of a firefight was more danger than help. Tobias climbed to the loft, positioned himself near a window that overlooked the yard. From here he could see the approach road, the corral, the barn. Good fields of fire. Cal knew what he was doing, had clearly thought about defending this place before. The lights came closer, resolved into individual torches, 7 of them, held by men on horseback. They rode slowly, cautiously, aware they were approaching a fortified position. Smart. These were not raw recruits but experienced soldiers. They stopped at the edge of the yard, just beyond easy rifle range. One man rode forward alone, his torch held high. In the flickering light, Tobias could see his face. Young, maybe 25. Corporal stripes on his sleeve. "Hello, the house," the corporal called. "I am Corporal Daniels, United States Cavalry, Fort Bowie. We are looking for a fugitive. An Apache woman escaped from custody. We tracked her to this area. Have you seen her?" Cal stepped out onto the porch, his rifle held casually but ready. "This is private property, Corporal. You have no authority to search here without a warrant. The woman is dangerous. She attacked soldiers, stole a horse, assaulted an officer. We have orders to bring her back for trial." Interesting, because the woman I met today showed signs of torture. Brands burned into her flesh, rope marks around her wrists and ankles, bruises consistent with repeated beatings. "Does your wanted fugitive match that description?" The corporal hesitated. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Then let me speak more clearly. If there is a woman here, and I am not saying there is, she would be under my protection as a guest in my home. You want her, you bring a proper warrant from a civilian judge, not military orders from the man who tortured her. You come back with legal authority and we can talk. Until then, you turn around and ride away from my property. I have 6 armed men with me, and I have 2 armed men in this house, fortified positions, and the legal right to defend my home against unlawful entry. You want to test those odds, Corporal? You want to explain to your commanding officer why you started a shooting war with a civilian over a woman you cannot prove is even here." The standoff stretched. Tobias watched through his rifle sights, finger on the trigger, ready but not eager. He had killed men before, knew what it cost, knew how it never really left you, the memory of taking a life. He did not want to kill these soldiers. Most of them were probably just following orders, unaware of what Wainwright truly was. But he would kill them if they forced the issue. To protect Kiona, to protect Cal and Emma. Some lines, once drawn, had to be held no matter the cost. The corporal seemed to sense this. He pulled his horse back a step. "We will return, with proper authority. You do that, and while you are getting that authority, I suggest you ask some questions about why Colonel Wainwright is so eager to recapture this particular woman. Ask about the other women who have gone missing from Apache camps. Ask about the brands. Ask about the gun running. Might learn some interesting things." Daniel said nothing, but something in his expression shifted. Doubt, perhaps, or the first crack in blind loyalty. He wheeled his horse, rejoined his men, and they rode away into the darkness, torches bobbing like fireflies until they disappeared over the ridge. Only then did Tobias lower his rifle and breathe. Cal called up to the loft. "They will be back. Tomorrow, maybe the next day. Wainwright will not let this go. We bought time, nothing more." "Time enough for Jonas to return?" "I hope so. I truly hope so." Tobias climbed down from the loft, found Kiona standing by the fire, her arms wrapped around herself despite the warmth. She looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes he had not seen before. Not gratitude, though that was there. Something deeper. Connection, perhaps. The bond that forms between people who have stood together against threat, who have chosen each other when they could have chosen safety. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not giving me to them, for standing. I made a promise to see this through, to help you find justice. I keep my promises. Even when keeping them might get you killed, especially then. Promises made in safety cost nothing. It is the ones that might cost everything that matter." She studied him in the firelight, and he wondered what she saw. A white man, a half-breed, a mountain man too stubborn to know when to quit, or just a person, flawed and broken and trying despite it all to do something right. Whatever she saw, it seemed to satisfy her. She nodded, turned away, but not before he caught the ghost of a smile. Small, fragile, but real. It was enough. Dawn came too slowly and too fast. Tobias had slept in shifts, waking every hour to check the yard, ensure no soldiers had crept close during darkness. But the night passed quietly, and when morning light finally painted the eastern sky, they were still safe, still waiting. Jonas did not return at noon as promised, nor at 1, nor at 2. By 3, Cal was pacing. Emma sat with Kiona, teaching her to sew, though Tobias suspected it was more to distract both of them than from any real need for needlework. And Tobias stood at the window watching Mufun, his worry growing with each passing hour. "He is not coming," Kiona said finally. "Something went wrong." "We do not know that," Cal said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We know. If he were successful, he would be here. If he is not here, he is captured or dead. Those are the only possibilities." She was right, and they all knew it. But admitting it meant accepting they had lost their best chance at evidence, that all they had was Kiona's testimony, which no court would accept against a white officer. That Wainwright would go unpunished, free to continue his crimes, marking more women, selling more guns, profiting from suffering. The injustice of it burned in Tobias's chest like swallowed fire. Then Emma, who had gone outside to feed the chickens, burst back through the door. "Someone is coming. One rider. He is hurt." They rushed outside. A horse approached at a slow walk, its rider slumped forward, barely staying in the saddle. As it drew closer, Tobias recognized the horse, recognized the rider. Jonas. He rode into the yard and simply fell, gravity pulling him from the saddle. Tobias caught him before he hit the ground, lowered him gently. Blood soaked the left side of Jonas's shirt. A gunshot wound from the look of it. High on the shoulder, probably missed the lung, but hit something important enough to cause serious bleeding. "I got it," Jonas gasped, his hand fumbling inside his shirt. The records, the book, everything, got it all. His hand emerged clutching a leather satchel, and he pressed it into Tobias's hands with the desperation of a dying man passing on a sacred trust. "Safe. Get it. To a judge. Real judge. Not military." "We will," Tobias promised. "But first we get you inside. Get that wound treated." "No time, Wainwright knows." "Coming. Whole garrison. Maybe 30 soldiers. Hour behind me. Maybe less. 30 soldiers. Against 4 people. One a wounded man. One an inexperienced girl. One a woman still recovering from torture. And Tobias himself. The mathematics of survival looked grim, but they had the evidence. That changed everything. "Cal," Tobias said, "we need to move. Now, get Jonas inside, patch him up enough to travel. We ride for Silver City. Find this judge you mentioned. Present the evidence before Wainwright can stop us. Silver City is 40 miles. Then we better ride fast." They worked quickly, efficiently, born from desperation. Emma helped Jonas inside while Cal saddled fresh horses. Tobias examined the satchel Jonas had brought, found inside exactly what they needed. Ledgers detailing gun sales, names, dates, amounts, correspondence with other officers, proving a conspiracy that went beyond just Wainwright. And most damning of all, the small leather book Kiona had described. 24 names, women's names, Apache, Navajo, Mexican, some marked with red ink, dead, all dead. Kiona looked over his shoulder, saw the names, and made a sound like a wounded animal. "I knew some of these women. We grew up together, played as children. I thought they had simply disappeared. Run away maybe, or been taken by other tribes. But no, they were here, marked and murdered." "Wainwright will answer for this," Tobias said. "I swear it. Swearing is easy. Making it happen is hard. Then we will do the hard thing. Together." Within 20 minutes they were ready. Jonas, bandaged and pale but conscious, sat on a horse with Emma behind him to hold him steady. Cal rode his own mount, rifle across his saddle. Kiona rode with Tobias on the buckskin, the satchel of evidence secured in his saddlebags like the most precious cargo in the world. Because that was what it was. Evidence that could bring down not just Wainwright, but the entire corrupt system that enabled him. Names of other officers, politicians who had taken bribes to look the other way, merchants who supplied the guns knowing where they would end up. A conspiracy of greed and violence that spanned the territory. They rode out as dust rose on the southern horizon. Wainwright's soldiers, coming fast, coming for blood, coming to silence everyone who knew the truth. But they were too late. The evidence was already moving, already being carried toward justice by people who refused to be silenced, who refused to let evil prosper simply because standing against it was hard. Tobias kicked the buckskin into a gallop, felt Kiona's arms tighten around his waist, heard Cal and Emma following close behind. The race was on. 40 miles to Silver City, 40 miles to justice or death. He hoped they would live to see which. They rode hard through the afternoon, pushing the horses to the edge of endurance. The trail to Silver City wound through high country, pine forests giving way to rocky ridges that offered little cover but clear sightlines. Tobias kept them moving at a punishing pace, knowing that every minute mattered, that Wainwright's soldiers were behind them with fresher horses and murder in their hearts. Jonas slumped against Emma, his face gray with blood loss. But he stayed conscious, stayed in the saddle, driven by the same stubborn will that had gotten him out of Fort Bowie alive. Cal rode beside them, his rifle ready, eyes constantly scanning their back trail for signs of pursuit, and Kiona sat behind Tobias, her arms wrapped around his waist, the leather satchel pressed between them like a heartbeat. Neither spoke. Words seemed unnecessary now. They had moved beyond language into something more primal. Survival, purpose, the shared understanding that they carried something worth dying for. The sun dropped toward the western peaks, painting the world in shades of copper and blood. Another hour of good light, maybe two, then darkness, which would slow them, but also slow their pursuers. A double-edged blade that could cut either way. They crested a ridge, and below them spread a valley. At its center, a cluster of buildings. Silver City, territorial capital, seat of law such as it existed in this wild country. Salvation, if they could reach it. A death trap if Wainwright caught them first. How far? Kuna asked, her voice hoarse from dust and exhaustion. 5 miles, maybe 6. Tobias checked the sun's position. We can make it before full dark if the horses hold. And if they do not, then we walk the last mile and pray. They descended into the valley following a wagon road rutted from recent rains. The horses were lathered now, white foam at their bits, flanks heaving, but they kept moving, driven by the urgency they sensed in their riders. Behind them, dust rose on the ridge they had just crossed. Riders, many of them, moving fast. They are closing, Cal said unnecessarily. Everyone could see it. How many? Tobias asked, though he dreaded the answer. Cal counted silently. 20, maybe 25. More than Jonas said. Wainwright must have pulled in troops from patrol. 25 soldiers against 4 civilians. The mathematics remained grim, but they were so close now. Silver City rose ahead, its buildings catching the last rays of sunlight, smoke from cooking fires, voices carrying on the evening air. Civilization, for whatever that was worth. They galloped into town as the sun touched the horizon, their horses stumbling with exhaustion. People stopped to stare at these wild riders, dust-covered and desperate. One man bleeding through his bandages, one woman wearing clothing that marked her as Apache. But no one moved to help. No one interfered. That was the way of frontier towns. Mind your own business. Ask no questions. Survive. Where is the judge? Tobias called to a man standing outside the general store. The man pointed. Courthouse, end of Main Street, but he has probably gone home for supper. Then we go to his home. Where does he live? White House with green shutters, 2 blocks east. But you cannot just ride up to Judge Stone's house demanding an audience. He is an important man. So are we. We bring evidence of treason and murder. He will want to see us. They found the house easily. White clapboard, green shutters, a small porch with rocking chairs, neat garden, the home of a man who valued order and propriety. Tobias hoped that extended to justice as well. He dismounted, helped Kiona down, then pounded on the door with enough force to rattle the frame. Behind them, Cal and Emma helped Jonas from his horse. The wounded man could barely stand, but he remained upright through sheer stubbornness. The door opened. A man stood there, 60 years old, gray beard neatly trimmed, spectacles perched on his nose. He wore a vest and shirt sleeves, the clothing of a man interrupted during his evening meal. His expression shifted from annoyance to concern as he took in their appearance. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. I do not conduct business at my home. Judge Caleb Stone? Tobias asked. I am he. My name is Tobias McCall. This is Kiona of the Chiricahua Apache. We have evidence of crimes committed by Colonel Marcus Wainwright, commanding an officer of Fort Bowie. Gun running, torture, murder. We need your protection and your authority to bring charges against him. Stone's expression went from annoyed to intensely focused. Evidence? What evidence? Tobias pulled the leather satchel from his saddlebags, opened it, withdrew the ledgers and the small book. Financial records showing gun sales to hostile tribes, correspondence proving conspiracy with other officers, and this. He handed over the small leather book. 24 names, women Colonel Wainwright kidnapped, tortured, and murdered. Some of them are marked with red ink, the dead ones. Judge Stone took the book with hands that trembled slightly. He opened it, read the first page, then the second. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. "Dear God," he whispered, "this cannot be real." "It is real," Kiona said, stepping forward. "I am number 24, the last entry. He branded me like cattle, then left me to die in a mountain. This man saved my life. Now we ask you to save his by taking this case, by using your authority to bring Wainwright to justice." Stone looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the Apache features to the person beneath. "You are the woman in this book? The most recent entry?" "I am, and I can prove it if necessary, though I pray I do not have to show anyone else what he did to me." "No, no, that will not be necessary, not yet." Stone stepped back, opened his door wider. "All of you come inside, quickly. If Wainwright learns you are here, he will try to silence you before you can testify." They filed into the house, and Stone closed the door behind them, through the bolt. His wife appeared from the kitchen, a plump woman with kind eyes that went wide at the sight of Jonas bleeding on her clean floor. "Martha, get bandages and water. This man needs medical attention, and prepare food. They look half-starved." "Yes, Caleb." She hurried away without questions. A judge's wife learned early not to question such things. Stone led them to his study, a room lined with law books and smelling of pipe tobacco. He lit 2 lamps, sat behind his desk, and began examining the evidence with the careful attention of a man who understood that what he held could change everything. "These ledgers," he said after several minutes, "they show sales of military weapons to known hostile forces. That alone is treason, punishable by death. And these letters." He shuffled through correspondence. "They implicate officers at 3 different forts. This is not just one corrupt man. This is a conspiracy." "Can you arrest them?" Tobias asked. "I can issue warrants, I can order them brought before a territorial court, but actually arresting them, especially military officers?" Stone shook his head. "That requires cooperation from the Army itself, and if the conspiracy goes as high as these letters suggest, we may not get that cooperation." "Then what do? We build a case that cannot be ignored. We gather witnesses, we document everything, and we pray that there are still enough honest men in positions of authority to care about justice." A sound came from outside. Horses, many of them. Then a voice, loud and commanding. "Judge Stone, I know you have fugitives in your house. I demand you release them to military custody immediately." Wainwright. He had caught up faster than Tobias expected. Stone's jaw tightened. He stood, moved to the window, pulled back the curtain slightly. Tobias joined him, looked out. 20 soldiers surrounded the house, rifles ready, and in front, mounted on a magnificent black horse, sat Colonel Marcus Wainwright. He was a handsome man, Tobias noted with distaste, the kind of features that inspired confidence. Strong jaw, clear eyes, the bearing of someone used to command and respect. Looking at him, you would never guess the monster that lived beneath that polished surface. "This is a civilian matter, Colonel," Stone called through the window. "You have no authority here. Those people are wanted for assaulting military personnel, theft of government property, and harboring a dangerous fugitive. I have every authority." "Show me your warrant." "I do not need a warrant. This is a military matter. The woman in my house is Apache, yes, but she is not a soldier, she is a civilian, which makes this a civilian matter under my jurisdiction. You want her, you bring me proper charges, filed with a civilian court. Until then, she is under my protection." Wainwright's expression darkened. "You are obstructing military justice, Judge. I could have you arrested." "You could try, but I am a territorial judge, appointed by the governor, answerable only to federal authority. You are a colonel, answerable to the territorial justice system when your actions involve civilians. Which of us do you think has more legal standing? The standoff stretched. Tobias watched, fascinated by this battle of words and authority. No guns yet, no violence, just two men, each claiming the right to decide who was protected and who was prosecuted. Finally, Wainwright spoke again. I will have those fugitives, Judge, one way or another. If not today, then tomorrow. If not through law, then through force. You cannot protect them forever. I do not need forever. Just long enough to convene a hearing and examine the evidence. 3 days, Colonel. Give me 3 days to hold a preliminary hearing, review the charges, determine if there is cause for trial. That is all I ask. And if I refuse, then you will be refusing a direct order from territorial judicial authority, which will look very suspicious when combined with the evidence I now possess regarding your activities. Evidence of gun running, evidence of torture, evidence of murder. Are you certain you want to add obstruction of justice to that list? Wainwright went very still. What evidence? Records taken from your office at Fort Bowie, financial ledgers, correspondence, and a rather interesting little book listing 24 names. Women you kidnapped and branded like cattle. Would you like me to read some of those names aloud, Colonel? Here, in front of your men? Or would you prefer to give me 3 days to examine this evidence in private court proceedings? The color drained from Wainwright's face. He understood now. The game had changed. The evidence was no longer just accusations, but documented proof that could destroy him. 3 days, he said finally, his voice tight. But my men will remain in Silver City to ensure the fugitives do not escape. Your men may remain, but they will not approach this house. They will not harass any witnesses. They will conduct themselves as representatives of the United States Army should, with honor and restraint. Is that understood? Understood. Wainwright wheeled his horse, gave orders to his men to make camp at the edge of town, then rode away into the gathering darkness. Only when the last soldier had disappeared did Tobias release the breath he had been holding. He will try to kill us, Kiona said quietly. Before the hearing, he cannot allow us to testify. I know, Stone agreed, which is why you will all remain here in my house, under guard. I have friends, deputies, men I trust. They will protect you until the hearing. And then? Then we hold a preliminary hearing, public, well attended. We present the evidence. We allow Wainwright to defend himself if he can, and we let justice decide what happens next. It sounded good, reasonable. But Tobias had lived long enough to know that justice was a luxury the powerful rarely faced. Wainwright had connections, money, influence. He would not go quietly to whatever fate awaited him. But for now, they were safe. For now, they had the protection of law, however fragile that protection might be. And they had evidence, real, documented, undeniable evidence. It would have to be enough. The cabin was quiet except for the crackling fire and the old man's breathing. Tobias sat with his eyes closed, remembering those 3 days in Judge Stone's house. The fear, the anticipation, the growing certainty that Wainwright would find a way to escape justice despite everything they had done. Samuel leaned forward on his stool. What happened at the hearing? Did they convict him? That comes in a moment. First, you need to understand something. Tobias opened his eyes, looked at his grandson with an intensity that made the boy sit straighter. Those 3 days changed me, changed how I saw justice, changed how I understood what it meant to stand up for what was right. How? Because every day Wainwright sent someone, not soldiers, he was too smart for that, but merchants, politicians, friends who came to Judge Stone's door offering deals. Drop the charges, they said. Forget this unpleasantness. The woman is Apache, after all. Who cares what happened to her? Wainwright is an important man, a war hero. Surely some accommodation can be reached. What did the judge say? He said no, every time, to every offer, even when they offered him money, even when they threatened his career. He said no because the law had to mean something. Justice had to mean something. Or else we were just animals wearing clothes, pretending to be civilized. Tobias reached for the eagle feather in the wooden box, held it up to the firelight. On the second day, Kiona gave me this. It belonged to her father, the chief. She said in Apache culture, the eagle represents courage, the courage to fly higher than other birds, the courage to see further, the courage to speak truth even when truth is dangerous. Why did she give it to you? Because she said I had shown that courage, by cutting her down, by refusing to look away, by standing with her even when it meant becoming hunted. She said her father would have respected me. And coming from her after everything she had endured, that meant more than any medal or title white men could give. Samuel was quiet, absorbing this. What happened on the third day? The hearing, the moment everything we had worked for came down to words spoken in a courtroom. Words that would determine whether Wainwright faced justice or walked free. The old man's voice grew stronger, and Samuel realized they were approaching the heart of the story, the moment that defined everything that came after. Let me tell you about that hearing, grandson. Let me tell you what it means to watch justice actually work, even when everything argues against it. The courthouse was packed. Every seat filled, people standing in the aisles, more crowded outside the windows straining to hear. Judge Stone had made the hearing public deliberately, knowing that sunlight was the best disinfectant for corruption. Whatever happened, it would happen where everyone could see. Tobias sat in the front row wearing clean clothes borrowed from Judge Stone. Beside him, Kiona sat straight-backed and dignified in a simple dress Martha Stone had given her. Cal and Emma sat behind them. Jonas, still weak from his wound but alive, sat with them, determined to see this through. And at the defendant's table sat Colonel Marcus Wainwright, flanked by his lawyer, a sharp-faced man from Santa Fe who specialized in defending military officers. Wainwright looked calm, too calm, as if he knew something they did not. Judge Stone entered, and everyone stood. He took his seat behind the bench, arranged his papers, then looked out at the crowded room. "This is a preliminary hearing," he announced. "The purpose is to determine if sufficient evidence exists to warrant a full trial. This is not the trial itself. No verdict will be rendered today. We are here simply to examine facts and decide if those facts merit further legal action. Is that understood?" Murmurs of assent from the crowd. "Very well. Prosecution may present its case." The territorial prosecutor stood, a young man, ambitious, but Tobias could see he was nervous. Taking on a military officer was career suicide for most lawyers, but he had agreed to do it anyway, convinced by the evidence Judge Stone had shown him. "Your Honor, I call Kiona of the Chiricahua Apache to testify." Kiona stood, walked to the witness chair with her head high. She placed her hand on the Bible as instructed, though Tobias knew she did not believe in the white man's God. But she swore anyway because the oath mattered to the court. "State your name for the record." "Kiona, my white name is Rising Moon. I am Chiricahua Apache, Warm Springs Band, daughter of Chief Cochillo, who was hanged by whites 3 years ago." "And how did you come to be at Fort Bowie?" "I was taken, after my father's death. Colonel Wainwright said I would be a translator. He lied. I was his slave. For 6 months he kept me, used me, hurt me when the mood struck him." Wainwright's lawyer stood. "Objection. This is inflammatory language designed to prejudice the court." "Overruled," Stone said. "The witness is describing her experience. Continue, Miss Kiona." She told her story, all of it, the assaults, the beatings, the night she found the ledgers and understood what Wainwright was doing, his fury when he caught her, the branding iron, heated until it glowed red, the pain that felt like dying but would not let her die. The courtroom was silent as death. Some people wept openly. Others sat stone-faced, perhaps not wanting to believe what they were hearing. "And then," the prosecutor prompted when she paused, "then he had his men take me to Superstition Mountain, tie me to a wooden cross, leave me to do it in the sun. He said my death would be a warning to other Apache women, that we all belonged to white men now, that resistance was futile. But you did not die." "No, Tobias McCall found me, cut me down, saved my life at great risk to his own." The prosecutor nodded, then did something Tobias had not expected. "Your Honor, the witness has testified to being branded. The defense will undoubtedly claim this is a lie, that no such brand exists. I ask the court's permission for the witness to present physical evidence." Stone hesitated. "Miss Kiona, do you understand what is being asked? You would need to show the court your injury in public." with all these people present. Kiona's hands trembled, but her voice remained steady. I understand, and I agree. Because without proof, I am just another Indian woman accusing a white officer. With proof, I am a victim, demanding justice. Very well. The court will clear all spectators except those directly involved in this case. No, Kiona's voice cut through the murmurs. Let them stay. Let everyone see. Let them witness what their army does to women they consider less than human. Stone looked at her for a long moment, and Tobias saw something like respect in the judge's eyes. Your courage is noted, Miss Kiona, if you are certain. I am certain. She stood, moved to where the judge could see clearly. Then, with hands that shook but did not hesitate, she lifted the hem of her dress to reveal her thigh. The brand stood out clear and damning. The letter W, the number 24, and below it, in smaller letters, property of MW. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, cries of outrage. Even hardened men who had seen their share of violence turned away, unable to look at what had been done to her. Wainwright sat frozen, his face bloodless. His lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, this proves nothing. The woman could have done this to herself, or someone else could have branded her for entirely different reasons. I call Dr. Samuel Pierce, the prosecutor said immediately. Army Medical Officer, Fort Bowie. An older man came forward, gray-haired and dignified. He took the oath, sat down. Doctor, have you examined this brand? I have. Judge Stone asked me to do so yesterday. The wound is approximately 2 weeks old. The pattern is consistent with a branding iron heated to approximately 800 degrees Fahrenheit. The depth and precision of the letters indicates it was held in place for at least 5 seconds, possibly longer. This injury could not be self-inflicted. The pain would cause unconsciousness before completion. Could someone else have done this to her on her instructions? Theoretically possible, but highly unlikely. Who would agree to such a thing? And why? The trauma, both physical and psychological, is severe. No one would voluntarily undergo this. The prosecutor nodded. And the letters themselves, W and M. Any significance? The defendant's initials are Marcus Wainwright in MW. The conclusion seems obvious. Wainwright's lawyer was on his feet again. Objection. Speculation. Sustained, Stone said. The doctor will confine himself to medical facts, not interpretations. But the damage was done. Everyone in that courtroom had seen the brand, had heard a respected military doctor confirm it was real, had watched Kiona's courage in displaying it. The prosecutor continued. He called Jonas, who testified about breaking into Fort Bowie, about finding the ledgers in the book of names. He presented the physical evidence, had it entered into the court record. He called Cal, who testified about his wife's death at the hands of Apache-wielding Winchester rifles, weapons they should not have been able to afford. Piece by piece, he built a case that was as solid as any Tobias had ever seen. Finally, he called the witness no one expected. I call Private Daniel Cooper, United States Army. A young man stood from the back of the courtroom, 21 years old, his face pale with fear, but determined. He walked to the witness stand on shaking legs. Private Cooper, you serve under Colonel Wainwright at Fort Bowie? I do, sir. I did. I resigned my commission yesterday. Why? Because I could not serve under a man like that anymore. Because I have done terrible things on his orders. Because if I stayed silent any longer, I would be as guilty as him. Tell the court what you witnessed. Cooper's voice shook, but he got the words out. I was there when he branded Kiona, August 12th, in his private office. He had me and Private Umali hold her down while he heated the iron in his fireplace. She screamed, begged us to stop, but he said if we let go, he would court-martial us for insubordination. So we held on. And he pressed that iron into her leg until the smell of burning flesh filled the room. Someone in the courtroom vomited. The sound was loud in the shocked silence. After he finished, he laughed, said she was number 24, said he was collecting a complete set, said once he had 50, he might publish a book about his conquests, make himself famous. Cooper was crying now, tears streaming down his young face. I should have stopped him, should have refused, should have reported him. But I was scared, a coward. And because of my cowardice, women suffered, died. I cannot take that back, But I can tell the truth now. I can say what I saw and let justice decide what it means. The prosecutor thanked him, sat down. Wainwright's lawyer stood for cross-examination. But what could he say? What questions could he ask that would undo this testimony? He tried. Private Cooper, is it not true that you were recently passed over for promotion? Might you have a grudge against Colonel Wainwright? I was passed over because I drink too much, because I have nightmares about the things I have done on his orders, because I am a broken man serving a broken system. My grudge is not against Wainwright personally. It is against what he represents. Corruption. Evil hiding behind authority. If testifying here destroys my life, so be it. Some things are worth losing everything for. After that, the lawyer gave up. Wainwright himself did not testify. His lawyer advised against it, knowing that anything the colonel said would only make things worse. Judge Stone called a recess. They waited 2 hours while he reviewed the evidence, examined the law, wrestled with the weight of what he was being asked to do. When court reconvened, his expression was grim. I have reviewed all evidence presented today. I have examined the physical proof, heard testimony from multiple witnesses, and considered the legal implications. It is the finding of this court that sufficient evidence exists to warrant a full trial on charges of assault, torture, conspiracy to commit murder, gun running, treason, and multiple violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. He looked directly at Wainwright. Colonel Marcus Wainwright, you are hereby ordered to stand trial in this court. You will be held without bail, pending trial, as you represent a flight risk and a danger to witnesses. Bailiff, take the defendant into custody. The courtroom exploded, cheers from some, outrage from others. Wainwright stood, his face twisted with fury, and for a moment Tobias thought he might try to fight. But the bailiff was already there, hand on his revolver, and Wainwright was smart enough to know when he was beaten, for now. As they led him away in chains, he looked directly at Kiona. His expression promised death, promised that this was not over, that he would find a way to make her pay for destroying him. But Kiona met his gaze without flinching, and in her eyes, Tobias saw not fear but something else. Victory, not complete, not yet, but the first taste of it. The knowledge that she had stood up, had spoken truth, and had been believed. That was worth every risk they had taken. The trial took place 3 weeks later. Tobias testified about finding Kiona on the mountain. Cal testified about his wife's murder. Jonas testified about the break-in. And Kiona testified again, this time in even greater detail, describing not just what Wainwright had done to her, but what she had witnessed him doing to others. It took the jury 2 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Judge Stone sentenced him to life in Yuma Territorial Prison with no possibility of parole. Wainwright's co-conspirators at other forts were also arrested, tried, and convicted. The gun-running network was destroyed. Reforms were implemented to prevent such abuses in the future. It was not perfect justice, nothing ever was, but it was justice nonetheless. 6 months later, word reached Silver City that Wainwright had been killed in Yuma Prison, stabbed by another inmate, an Apache man serving time for horse theft. The guards claimed they saw nothing, investigated nothing, and no charges were ever filed. Tobias heard the news and felt nothing, not satisfaction, not sorrow, just a weary acceptance that sometimes justice took many forms, and not all of them wore robes and carried gavels. The cabin fire had burned down to coals. Tobias finished his story, set down the eagle feather, and looked at his grandson. "You came here wanting to learn how to kill," he said softly. "I have told you instead about learning when not to kill, about choosing justice over revenge, about standing for what is right even when it costs everything." Samuel was quiet for a long time. "Did you ever see Kiona again, after the trial?" "Once, 10 years later. I heard she had opened a healing camp for Apache women who had survived abuse. I rode out to see her. She was older, stronger, surrounded by women she had helped save. She still had the scar, never tried to hide it. She said it reminded her of what she had survived, of her strength, not his cruelty." I asked what became of the others. Cal had remarried, she told me, to a widow from Silver City who understood loss. Together, they built the ranch into something larger, a place known for treating all people fairly. Emma had grown into a fierce woman, teaching Apache children on reservations, carrying forward her father's belief in human dignity regardless of color. Jonas recovered from his wound, though his left arm never regained full strength. He could no longer draw a bow with his old precision, but found new purpose as a translator, helping negotiate fair treaties. He died in 1902, respected by both whites and Indians. And Judge Stone? He faced pressure to resign after the trial. Powerful men in Washington wanted him gone, wanted the scandal buried. He refused, served 10 more years on the bench, extending legal protections to those the law had ignored. When he retired in 1886, even his enemies admitted he had been the most honest judge the territory ever knew. What happened to you? I kept living, kept helping people when I could, became known as someone fugitives could trust, someone who would stand up for those who could not stand for themselves. It was not an easy life, but it was a good one, better than hiding in these mountains, pretending the world did not exist. He reached across, placed his hand on Samuel's shoulder. Your father died doing something brave, saving another soldier. That is who he was. That is the man you should honor. Not by killing Germans who had nothing to do with his death, but by living the way he would want you to live, with courage, with honor, with compassion for those who suffer. Samuel's eyes were wet. I do not know how to do that. Neither did I at your age. Neither did Kiona. We learned, by trying, by failing, by getting up and trying again. That is all anyone can do. The boy was silent, staring into the coals. Finally he spoke. Will you teach me? Not how to kill, but how to be the kind of man you became, the kind my father was. Tobias felt something loosen in his chest, relief perhaps, or hope. I will teach you everything I know, starting with this. The strongest men are not those who kill. They are those who know when not to kill, who choose mercy when vengeance would be easier, who stand up for the powerless even when powerful people tell them to sit down. He stood, moved to the window, looked out at the snow falling thick and white. Somewhere in the darkness, the ghosts of the past watched and waited. His mother, his wife, the men he had killed at Sand Creek and after. And Kiona, still alive somewhere, carrying her scars and her strength into old age. She taught me something important, Tobias said to the window, to the night, to his grandson. She taught me that dignity is not given, it is reclaimed. That survival is not enough. We must also live, and living means making choices that matter, standing for something beyond ourselves, leaving the world a little better than we found it. He turned back to Samuel. That is the lesson, grandson. Not how to kill your enemies, but how to refuse to become them. Can you learn that? Samuel stood, came to stand beside his grandfather at the window. Together they watched the snow fall, covering the mountain in silence, making all things clean and new. I can try, the boy said. Then you are already ahead of where I was at your age. They stood together in the firelight, 2 generations bound by blood and story, by the understanding that some lessons could only be learned through pain, and some truths could only be spoken by those who had survived them. Outside, the wind sang through the pines. Inside, the fire crackled, and in the space between, an old man and a young one made their peace with the past and their promises to the future. The story was finished. The lesson was given. What Samuel did with it would be his choice to make. But for tonight, it was enough that he had listened, enough that he had heard, enough that he understood revenge was not justice and killing was not courage. And the hardest battles were fought not with weapons, but with the simple decision to remain human in a world that tried to make monsters of us all. That was Kiona's gift. That was what she had taught Tobias on that mountain 44 years ago. And now, through this story, through this long night of remembering, he had passed it on. The rest was up to Samuel. The rest was always up to the next generation.